Good morning, and let me add my congratulations and welcome to student teaching. I'm Dr. Mercado, and my job today is to introduce you to the new student teacher assessment forms, which your cooperating teacher, university supervisor, and you will be using this semester to help you evaluate the progress you make throughout student teaching. You may be wondering why we've adopted a new system of assessment for student teachers. Here's the reason. In 2009, the West Virginia Board of Education required all teacher certification programs to be reauthorized by the state. A goal of that mandate was to align all teacher education programs with the West Virginia Professional Teaching Standards and the National Educational Technology Standards for Teachers. Once the Shepherd University programs were reauthorized by the state, realigning our system of assessment for student teachers with the new standards became necessary. So that's why I'm here, to walk you through the criteria on which you will be assessed and to familiarize you with the form you will use for self-evaluation. The new forms all include the label ST11. They replace the ST76, which you may remember from your PED classes, or 370 and 443. First, let's define some of the terms that you will see throughout the ST11 forms. They are standards, functions, and performance indicators. The ST11 assessments are based on 5 standards. Each standard is divided into subcategories called functions that help define the standard. The way an evaluator can really determine whether or not you have met or exceeded the standard is by looking for observable indicators in your classroom performance and then determining the quality of that performance. We'll come back to these terms later when we talk about how to rate yourself on the ST11 self-evaluation. For now, let's talk about what kinds of evaluations you can expect during student teaching. First, you will receive an ongoing guidance and feedback from your cooperating teacher. He or she will use the formative development that you demonstrate throughout the semester to complete the ST11 CT evaluation form, which is then submitted to your student teaching binder in TK20. Whether you have one or more university supervisors, each one will contribute to your formative development by observing you in the classroom and submitting the ST11 observation form on TK20, at least 5 in all. The university supervisor also completes the ST11 US summative evaluation form based on all 5 observation reports. And finally, in keeping with our expectation that you reflect on your own practice, you will complete the ST11 self-evaluation form and submit it on TK20 no later than the beginning of the last week of student teaching. Here's the rating scale used on all ST11 forms by you, your cooperating teacher, and your supervisors. It evaluates the quality of performance on each function and standard. Let's start at the top, since that's where you want to be by the end of student teaching. Exceeds standard requires that you demonstrate the functions extensively or at a high level of proficiency or effectiveness. You will see that when you first begin, many of your functions may be below this rating. But don't worry, we don't expect you to be perfect, or you wouldn't need to student teach at all. If your first observations produce mostly meets standard ratings, which describes an adequate or acceptable level of proficiency or effectiveness, you will know what to work on to improve. Approaches standard is a marginal or limited level of proficiency or effectiveness, more in line with beginning students in PED 1 or 370. If you find yourself earning this rating from your supervisor or mentor, be sure that you're proactive in determining how you can improve, because you need to be able to meet all 5 standards by the end of student teaching, and I'm sure you will. Okay. You should have a copy of the ST11 self-evaluation form, so please take a look at page 1 now. This slide shows the format for each of the 5 standards. As I mentioned earlier, each standard is subdivided into functions. So here you see the first 2 functions of Standard 1, which covers curriculum and planning. A, content, and B, pedagogy. Each function must be rated individually based on the performance indicators that you have demonstrated. Remember that this is a summative evaluation, so you will need to start early in the semester using a paper copy of the form to check off the performance indicators you have demonstrated. I suggest you have it on hand every day for 2 reasons. First, you need to be very familiar with the criteria on which you're being assessed. And second, you should keep track of the performance indicators you've demonstrated. Once you've determined which performance indicators you have demonstrated for a particular function, then mark the appropriate rating on the left-hand side. When you have rated each function in the standard, you are ready to determine the overall rating for that standard. Now look down to the bottom of page 1, and you will see the scoring rubrics for determining an overall rating for the standard. Notice that each rating category requires specific criteria. Here's a quiz. Let's say you have rated 4 functions in this standard at the meets standard level, using a variety of the performance indicators, and you have 1 function at the approaches standard level. Turn and tell the person sitting next to you what the overall standard rating should be. That's right, meets standard. You've got it. Now, turn all the way down to page 6. This is where you will determine the final overall rating on all 5 standards. Take a look at the specific criteria for each rating category. Also notice that by the end of student teaching, all 5 standards must score at least meets standard to be recommended for certification. Keep in mind that when you were rating an individual standard, you could have one function at the approaches standard level and still meet that overall standard. For this final rating, you will be looking at the overall ratings on each of the 5 standards. So in other words, to meet licensure requirements, one function in each standard could be at the approaches standard level, and you'd still be okay. But if one entire standard is rated approaches standard, then licensure requirements have not been met. That's why it's so important to keep up with your assessment criteria throughout the semester. If you have a concern, talk to your mentor or supervisor about how to improve. And finally, you will need to submit the ST11 self-summative evaluation on TK20 no later than the beginning of the last week of student teaching. That's it for now. This video will be available on TK20 just as soon as we can get it posted. In the meantime, if you have questions, refer to your printed copy of the assessment guidelines for student teachers. You can email me, or better yet, discuss your concerns with your cooperating teacher or university supervisor. Thanks for your attention to this important information. I wish you all the best in your student teaching experience, and make it a great semester.